I'm here today at the SDG Forum in Brussels to tell you all about the SDGs. Among the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, there are the end of the poverty and hunger worldwide, reducing inequality and ensuring quality education for all. Only 5 years before 2030, famines are still raging in Palestine, South Sudan or even Congo. More than 70% of the children worldwide do not have access to primary education. And between 2000 and 2024, the wealthiest 1% of the world were holding 49% of the wealth of global, while the poorest half only had 1%. In this video, we will understand how did we get here, everything to know about the SDGs, and what the future holds.
Hello, my name is Camilla Bruckner. I represent the United Nations towards the European Union and to Belgium. And I also head the Office of the United Nations Development Programme, which operates all over the world.
Je m'appelle Jean-Luc Ruc, je suis ministre fédéral de la mobilité, du climat, du développement durable et de la transition.
I'm Lars. I'm Lars Moratis. I'm a professor at Antwerp Management School in the field of sustainability.
First of all, you might ask yourself, what are the SDGs? The SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, are global blueprints created by the UN to eradicate poverty, protect the planet and ensure prosperity for all by 2030. All 193 UN member states signed on to this vision. The SDGs form part of the broader 2030 agenda, which include 169 targets and 244 indicators used to measure progress. These targets are grouped into 5 pillars: people, prosperity, planet, peace and partnership. They act as a roadmap for building a fairer, healthier and more sustainable world. Through them we see how every challenge humanity faces is deeply interconnected and cannot be solved in isolation. The guiding principle behind the SDGs is simple: no one should be left behind. In many ways, the SDGs invite us to dream a world where responsibility, prosperity and environmental protection are shared fairly among all.
The SDGs are perfectly attainable, first of all. We know that because if you look at Europe has attained a lot of the SDGs. And where we have not attained the SDGs in Europe is on the green agenda and on the environment. And we know the measures that we need to implement to attain these. So it is perfectly possible. We simply haven't invested enough. There has not been enough resources to achieve them. I don't think anyone is expecting us to achieve them by 2030, but that doesn't render them any less relevant. They're still hugely relevant. Many countries in the world and people aspire to many of the values and aspirations that there are in the SDGs.
So let's take a deeper dive into origins and the timeline.
D'ici 2030, comment vous pensez que les SDGs vont améliorer la vie quotidienne des citoyens?
Quand on voit d'où on vient par rapport à l'accord de Paris, 10 ans. L'accord de Paris nous disait, si on ne change rien, on sera au-delà de 4 degrés Celsius par rapport à la période pré-industrielle. Avec ce qui a été fait comme effort, qui reste insuffisant, il faut dire les choses comme elles sont, on est aujourd'hui à 2,8 degrés Celsius. Ça reste insuffisant et ça reste extrêmement grave. Je ne sais pas si on imagine, c'est sur cette maison par exemple, une maison qui disparaît. Mais malgré tout, on sent bien qu'il y a des efforts qui se sont faits, qui ont été faits, ils doivent continuer à se faire. Et moi je ne veux pas être quelqu'un qui soit un oiseau de mauvais augure. Je me dis qu'il y a le verre qui est à moitié plein. Continuons collectivement à montrer que travailler pour le climat, c'est pas travailler contre soi, c'est pas travailler contre la société, c'est plus de bonheur, c'est surtout plus de vie, plus de biodiversité, plus d'emplois et aussi plus d'économie.
SDGs grow out of the MTGs, which is the Millennial Development Goals, which focus mainly on developments in the global south at the start of the new millennium. Biggest difference is that the SDGs applies to every country, not just the poorest one. They also expand the focus to include economic growth, climate issues and sustainability. The MTGs had only 7 goals, while the SDGs expanded this to 17. The 2023 SDG Summit in New York marked the beginning of an effort to accelerate SDGs implementation. Reaching the halfway point 2013, the summit was meant to act as an SDG stimulus. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres urged world leaders to speed up progress by focusing on 7 priorities. First, mobilizing 500 billion annually for development, meeting the target of 0.7% of national income for development aid, and arriving at COP28 with a concrete plan to support developing countries in their energy transition.
En tant que ministre, comment vous mettez en place les SDGs?
Écoutez, d'abord, on les met en place en écoutant ce que le monde associatif, dans son sens le plus large, nous dit. Parce que nous sommes non pas des précurseurs, mais des exécuteurs, dans le sens positif du terme. Et puis on essaie de les décliner dans toutes les strates et sphères de la société. Les SDGs, c'est pas qu'une intention, que je le dis souvent, c'est d'abord du concret, ça doit être du très concret même. Il y a une forme de monitoring au cabinet, de suivi qui se fait par notre cellule, la cellule climat, mais l'administration fait également la même chose, c'est-à-dire qu'elle nous donne des datas, les renseignements, et au besoin, on corrige si on voit que les objectifs ne sont pas atteints.
Let's talk a little bit more about the COP28. At COP28, the world agreed to create a new Lost and Damaged Fund to help developing countries cope with climate change and climate-related destruction. But initially, contributions amounted to only a few $100 million, far too little compared to the hundreds of billions needed every year. The fund is now operational, temporarily hosted by the World Bank for 4 years. Total pledge currently reach around 792 million, still nowhere near what experts say is required to protect vulnerable nations from rising climate impacts. What is so initiable in the SDGs? So let's talk a little bit more about the data.
The thing is, for me, with the Human Development Index, it's a good, let's say, criterion to see what the quality of life is. And for me, the main message with the Human Development Index is when you plot the Human Development Index on a scale, the x-axis, and you plot on the y-axis, you plot the ecological footprint that countries have available for realizing what they do, right, for achieving what they do. The thing is that there's a sustainable development quadrant, which is characterized by a high human development and a low level of biocapacity. And the tragic story actually of our time, I think, is there's no country in the world that is kind of in that sustainable development quadrant. So in developing also economically, but let's say on the Human Development Index, what you see in the course of time that countries develop from developing countries to emerging economies to highly developed economies, they all kind of shoot by the sustainable development quadrant. And basically that for me is the story of our time and that we should really try to reverse.
Data from 2024 show that only 70% of the SDGs are actually on track, while another 70% are actually moving backward. The goals showing the most progress are clean energy and responsible consumption, while the worst performers are zero hunger. Despite this, the Sustainable Development Report showed that by 2025, 190 out of 193 UN member states had adopted national SDGs action, and only 3 countries failed to submit a voluntary national review: Vietnam, Myanmar, Haiti, and the United States. VNR are a voluntary report that tracks a country progress in implementing the 2030 agenda. Even if we remain far from achieving the SDGs by 2013, many countries have made real progress, especially in South and East Asia, which have shown the fastest improvements across 17 indicators since 2015. For many developing countries, the biggest obstacle is fiscal capacity. Over half of the world's population lives in this country. Yet global wealth continues to flow disproportionately toward richer nations, leaving emerging economies without the resources needed to meet the SDGs. During the 2023 summit, the President of the UN General Assembly, Denis Francis, highlighted several factors undermining SDGs progress: the pandemic, climate change, and ongoing global conflicts.
Such big events like COVID, they delay the SDGs even more. So we're not on a good track. We're not reaching the progress levels that we set out to achieve. And those events like COVID, but also the Russian invasion of Ukraine, for example, they really tend to reduce the speed in which we are achieving the SDGs. Interesting question then, because what's the resilience of the SDGs? And I think the SDGs are, as was said during this conference, not only objectives, not only goals, but a promise, right? And we're kind of breaking that promise because of these large events that we also allow happening.
So what now?
This is, of course, a huge challenge. And we were actually quite well on track before the pandemic. We were making very good progress. A lot of stakeholders across society were taking on board the SDGs and using them as a strategic direction and for planning tool. Even businesses used it as their, business development platform. Then hit the pandemic and set us back significantly. The big issue is, of course, that there are many interests that have to shift from a fossil fuel-based economy to a renewables-based economy. And we need to change this interest, and there are now actually more investment in renewables than there are in fossil fuels. So it is possible, but the problem is we have not invested enough.
As mentioned earlier, the 2023 summit announced the creation of a 500 billion annual financing package to support developing countries in implementing the SDGs. Another key point raised at the summit was the urgent need to strengthen multilateralism, the idea that global cooperation can help us solve challenges of this scales. So this was also highlighted in the COP20 by the president of Brazil, Lula. So if you want to ask my opinion about all of that, I do think that the SDGs were initially unachievable by the deadline, and maybe forever, and maybe it's a bigger picture issues tried to be solved with low impact actions. I hope this video helped you in understanding a little bit more about everything that's going on, and that you could make an opinion of yourself. If you like this video, we'll really appreciate your opinion. What you think about the SDGs, what do you think is going to happen in the future, because this is something unpredictable. And thank you for watching.